Are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control them? I believe they are.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. There is the love of God. And if you have any doubt concerning the love of God, look at the cross.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
We establish no religion in this country, nor will we ever. We command no worship. We mandate no belief. But we poison our society when we remove its theological underpinnings. We court corruption when we leave it bereft of belief.
And welcome into another edition of American Heritage Live. I'm your host, Jeff DeShazo, along with co-host Ron Meyer, and our prolific producer to my extreme left, in his black professional shirt, is Daniel Connor, giving his salutatory wave as usual, hands on the board, alert as always. Well, it's another fantastic afternoon as we're enjoying our new slot here on 97.7 The Peach, 3 to 4 in the afternoon. And welcome in, everybody. If you're out and about going for snacks or looking for something on the internet or whatever, we hope that you'll stay with us, because this afternoon we have an extraordinary guest. State House District 73 Representative Matt Fridy is going to be here to discuss the Obergefell versus Hodges decision from the Supreme Court, basically deciding same-sex ruling for this country. But first, let's get some announcements But very first, top of the hour, we want to go into our weatherman, Mr. Wally Blue. Wally, are you with us?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead with the weather there, Wally. We need a little update from you.
Weather?
Yes, weather. W-E-A-T-H-E-R, if grammar school spelling reaffirmed that. Weather. Give the weather.
Yeah, we've got it.
That's good, Wally. Can you give us a little more detail? We are on the air.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Jeff. It is raining somewhere.
Good, Wally. Very good. Raining where exactly?
This one is in Okinawa. Just got this report in. They expect rain throughout the entire day today.
Now, wait a minute. Are you kidding me? Okinawa? How about the greater Alabama area, the greater Birmingham area? What's the weather right now? Weather, Wally. Mr. Weather. We're paying for the spot, weather. Mr. Weatherman, give it.
Yeah, we're going to get some warm weather, Jeff.
Good. Well, that's enough of Wally, I think. Let's go back to some news outlets here and bring back in our co-host, Ron Meyer. We're going to fire that guy. I don't know who's... Anyway, welcome back in, Ron. Did you have a good Sunday afternoon?
I had a wonderful Sunday afternoon, Jeff. Thanks.
Well,
how about you?
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we've got a lot in some headlines here we want to cover.
Sure.
I don't know if you saw this, Ron. This came from LifeSite News, based on the fallout of the Obergefell versus Hodges Supreme Court decision. Back in June, there's been no shortage of anti-Christian rhetoric from various media outlets in the fallout from the Supreme Court decision, basically decreeing homosexual marriage across this country. And here's a quote, Ron. It said, "Too many Christians, not enough lions," was one reference, capitalizing on the Christian martyred in Rome.
Yes.
The LGBT activists responded to the Catholic Votes Pro-Marriage Not Alone video. According to the president, Brian Birch, it was released the day of the decision, Obergefell versus Hodges. The video logged more than 1.3 million views, and this is the quote, from the activists. Basically said this: "Seeing the power of our message, LGBT lesbian, gay activists have now supported a massive campaign to mock, ridicule, and shame," as Birch wrote to supporters. "They've used every curse word and more to attack us personally. They threatened our staff with phone calls. Now some are openly calling for the persecution of Christians." That continued on this discussion with Jules Sudoltsev on the Huffington Post. Was Jesus gay? And there's a very derogatory, blasphemous article written there basically bringing into question whether or not Jesus was a gay man. Ron.
Now remember that George Soros is a big contributor to Huffington Post.
Right.
And so you're not going to get fair, responsible reporting from that station, or that paper, rather. Jeff, there's been a lot of input on what's going on right now. Let me ask you this question now. As a Christian, what should the response be?
Well, I think there's several things, and I'll mention these. I think there's several things that believers can do, and we're going to get into more details of this later in the show, but there's several things that we can do. That U.S. Congress can pass a federal Constitution amendment to define marriage as one man, one woman. 38 states must then have to ratify it. But as far as what individuals can do now, you've got to discuss this. You've got to become engaged. You've got to become active participant in the arena discussion of this topic. So don't be afraid to talk about it with the pundits involved. I think at work and at play and your home environment, it's very important to talk about it. Number one, self-assessment. You're asking me what can we do? You need to decide, are you assimilating, withdrawing, or participating in the culture? Where are you there? And also, you can help your church and ministries from sexual orientation, gender identity lawsuits there. They need to be educated. Teach your children about God's design for marriage. And finally, I think this is very important, contact your state family policy council. Okay? 38 states have these. Contact your state family policy council and find out ways as a grassroots level that you can support First Amendment rights for future generations.
Yeah, I think too, Jeff, obviously this has been a real terrible ruling by the Supreme Court. One of the questions I think I was going to ask Matt, and I can throw it out, is my understanding used to be that if a judge was involved with a case, how could they be allowed to vote on a decision? And Ruth Bader Ginsburg had actually married a gay couple, and here she is now sitting on the Supreme Court, right, and ruling how she's going to vote even before you hear the case. I couldn't figure that one out, but let me throw this out to you, because I really had this on my heart. As a Christian, we have to be careful. No, we don't lay down and roll over and go to sleep. Absolutely not. But we have to guard our hearts. And we do that by going to the Lord and having Him to deal with our heart first. And then we speak the truth. So the perspective we come from is how would Christ, what would He say? How would He respond in a situation like this? And yes, we have to take stands, but I think a lot has to do with our heart, where our heart is at on that.
Yeah, I think so. I think as Paul wrote about, we need to be salt and light.
Yes.
And we talked about that many times, Ron, on the show. We can't disengage from culture. We have to impact culture, and that's what we're trying to do in the show, is keep guests, keep our listeners engaged and informed, but also what is the response of the believer.
That's right.
As well. Now, this country is basically a Republican form of government, okay? So we have representative government. They are there to serve us. Well, producers are giving me a signal it's time to take a break, and during the break, we're going to go ahead and get State Representative from District 73, Matt Fridy, on the line. Folks, you're listening to American Heritage Live. Don't go away. We'll be back on the other side. Hi, everybody. This is Jeff DeShazo, host of American Heritage Live. I'd like to tell you about my real estate business with Keller Williams Realty. For the past 17 years, I have been serving the greater Birmingham area. When it comes to life's experiences, few areas give more satisfaction than owning your own home. This is a part of the American dream. Perhaps you own a home and would like a free comparative market analysis before you list it to sell. Or you may need to downsize, or need a larger home. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or considering buying a second home for your family vacations, whatever your needs are, I invite you to call me today at 205-223-7653, or you can visit my website at jeffdeshazo.com. That's Jeff, DESHAZO.com, and there you can request free listing alerts for any houses you like to be sent to you. I'd also like to send you my free mobile phone app for your smartphone, where you can search for houses over your phone. Please call me today at 205-223-SOLD. That's 205-223-7653. 223-7653. And together, we'll make real estate your estate. And welcome back in to American Heritage Live. I'm your host, Jeff DeShazo, along with co-host Ron Meyer, producer Daniel O'Connor. And we didn't mention at the start of the show like we wanted to, and that is our sponsors. They're very important and help to make the show possible. For you, our listeners, that's Brad Phillips with Homewood Auto Body Specialist, Jim King of Hedges and Highways Ministry, and myself, I'm a sponsor too, Jeff DeShazo with Keller Williams Realty in Hoover. And now what we want to do is bring in our very special guest, State House Representative from District 73, Matt Fridy. Matt, are you with us? Which one? This one? This one? Matt, are you with us?
I am.
Excellent, excellent.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Doing great. Glad to be back with you guys.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've heard your voice. Good to hear you, man.
It's good to be back.
Well, man, I tell you what we wanted to do was take a different turn if we can. And let's start on the local level and find out from you, State District Representative from 73, State House Representative, what has been happening on the state level. And then Ron's got a question for you. What have you been up to lately?
Well, I've got to tell you, there have been some great things that have happened in the legislature this year. And, of course, what you hear over and over again is the general fund, the budget problems we're having there. But unfortunately, that's kind of overshadowed a lot of great things that we accomplished this year. One of the ones that I'm very, very proud of is charter schools. Alabama now joins 42 other states, finally, in having charter schools, which, as you know, charter schools are public schools. They're run as public institutions, but they aren't required. They don't exist under the same strictures. They can change, for example, their meeting times when school starts and ends. They could do things like move to year-round schools. There's a lot more parental involvement in charter schools, and this is really going to be a great tool for some of the areas in Alabama where we've experienced traditionally low-performing schools. Thinking about some of the inner-city areas like Birmingham, where we need a new way of thinking about education. And so I'm excited about our charter schools. I was really excited about something we didn't have to do this year, and that's the Tim Tebow bill. Of course, the Tim Tebow bill is what it was designed to do was to allow parents of homeschoolers to be able to have their homeschoolers be able to play sports in public schools. And the idea is they're taxpayers, they're paying for education. Let their children have the same ability that public school students have to play sports for the public schools. And it turns out, as we passed that bill in the House and it was being seriously considered in the Senate, one of the big holdouts was the Alabama High School Athletic Association. And they came to the table and they said, if you guys will not pass the bill, then we're going to draft rules to start allowing homeschool students to play sports in public schools and do other kinds of extracurricular activities as well. And so, we were very excited we didn't have to pass a law to get the change that we were after.
Well, that's tremendous about charter schools. And Ron, you've got a question for
Matt, let me ask you about this deficit that we had this past year. How did that come about? What was that due to? And what is the resolution now? Where are we at with a resolution to deal with that?
here's the problem. We kicked the can down the road over and over and over again. When the economy went south in 2008, 2009, we had big budget problems. But that was okay because the federal government stepped in and started pumping money into all the states. We borrowed money out of our rainy day accounts. We borrowed money out of our trust funds. We borrowed money everywhere that we could to patch holes. Well, we're out of places now. And I'm going to tell you, as a freshman representative, I've really enjoyed this. This is my first session in the legislature, and it's the first session where we haven't been able to patch things with different funds of money out there by borrowing here, borrowing there, or relying on the federal government. And so we're really having to dig in, and I'm excited to be part of the process. I mean, we've got to change the way that we budget long term. Now, on the education trust fund side, we're doing great. In fact, the projections are that we're actually going to be about $200 million over. What our budget calls for, and this is one of the best budgets we've passed. This budget, the Education Trust Fund budget, passed the House 105-0 and passed the Senate 35-0. First time ever that a budget has passed unanimously.
Wow.
Even some of our traditional opponents, like AEA, over the years, were telling us how excited they were about the budget that we passed. We were able to do significant increases for pre-K and for a number of other programs that we just haven't been able to adequately fund in the past. On the general fund side, that's where we've got a deficit of about $250 million, and that's we passed a budget. The House did. The Senate passed it. The governor vetoed it, and that budget required steep cuts throughout government, and the governor, like I said, the governor vetoed it. The House overrode the veto, but the Senate adjourned a day early. And so they didn't have the opportunity to override the governor's veto, and that's why we don't have a general fund budget for the coming fiscal year. It begins October 1.
Wow. So where do we go with this then?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion. As you know, the governor's called a special session, called it earlier than we had anticipated. We thought we would have until about August. There are a lot of conversations going on, a lot of work being done, a lot of research being done to try and figure out how to overcome this $250 million budget deficit. But he called it. He called the special session for mid-July. We went into session for a day. His proclamation was read, and we adjourned until August the 3rd. And we'll go back August the 3rd. We'll work all of that week and then into the next week. We're required by law to have finished the special session within 30 calendar days of the call. So that means by August 12th, that is the last day that we're allowed to meet by law in this special session. Of course, the governor could call another special session. I anticipate that we're going to be able to come up with some ways to overcome this $250 million shortfall. And there's a lot of conversations that are ongoing. One of the things the governor has proposed is a 5-cent a 5-cent tax on liquids, on Cokes, on bottled water, on basically anything that's liquid other than milk and juice. A 5 cents per 12 ounces tax. There are a number of states have done this. Personally, I'm opposed to it. I'm against raising taxes. Generally speaking, I don't have a problem raising taxes as much on tobacco and alcohol because I see those as things that cause a lot of problems to our budget on the Medicaid side and law enforcement side, and so it's more like a user fee, I think, when we raise the taxes on tobacco and alcohol. But as to other taxes generally, I'm absolutely opposed, and so. But that's one of the things the governor has talked about. We're also looking at redoing the way that we do the business privilege tax, so that we would raise the cap on it. So your largest businesses, mostly out-of-state businesses like Walmart, Target, and others, would go from paying $15,000 a year to paying $22,000 a year. But your smallest LLCs, they're talking about 100,000 of the smallest businesses, there would no longer be a business privilege tax for them, and so they'd actually get a tax cut. And I've heard from several interest groups, BCA and others, that actually support this approach. And it would raise about $50 million for the state. So there are a number of things that we're looking at, and I'm confident that we're going to come up with something. I'm confident that it is going to involve cuts, because frankly, there are places in government that need to be cut. And I think kind of a combination approach, we're gonna get there.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, Matt, that is a superb summary of what's been happening in the state. I appreciate you going into great detail because that's beneficial to our listeners. All right, now let's shift gears to the meat of why we wanted you here. And you know what's coming is basically to just Do a shakedown. Just do a breakdown, better put, I would say, of the recent Supreme Court ruling of Obergefell versus Hodges that basically, in short, legalized same-sex marriage for the country. Let me just give a short summary, Matt, and then I'm going to have you dive in, and we'll have some questions on this if that's okay.
Sure.
Supreme Court ruled there is a federal constitutional right to same-sex marriage. The court's sweeping ruling has the net effect of legalizing same-sex marriage at the federal and state levels across the country. It basically, the ruling negates a 31-state marriage amendments plus other states' laws safeguarding man-woman marriage and imposes a Roe v. Wade 50-state type mandate requiring every state to license and to recognize same-sex marriages. It was Justice Anthony Kennedy sided with the liberal wing in the 5-4 decision that one man, one woman marriage laws violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. That was the rub. The majority decision, he wrote, held that marriage is, quote, a fundamental right guaranteed by the, quote, due process clause of the 14th and cannot be denied to same-sex couples. Justices Ginsburg, Breyer, Kagan, and Sotomayor joined in the majority decision. Justices Scalia, Roberts, Alito, and Thomas each filed dissenting opinions. Now, we've invited Matt Fridy in, a State House representative, because we consider him a constitutional scholar. We can't get into those details. So, Matt, we want you to help us break this down. What is the immediate, let's begin with what is the immediate impact? To tell you what, we're already getting a signal from our producer. We ran a little long on the first segment. If you can chew on that a bit, Matt, and when we come back from the break, we're going to pass the baton to you and let you do your thing. How about that?
Sounds great.
All right. You folks, you're listening to the voice of State Representative from District 73, Matt Fridy, here on American Heritage Live. We'll be back.
This is David Barton. You're listening to American Heritage Live with Jeff DeShazo and Ron Meyer.
Friends, have you been in a car accident recently and need to get some body work done, or do you need a new paint job for that favorite car? Then write this down. Homewood Auto Body Specialist. That's where you need to go. They are locally owned and have been in business for over 23 years. Brad Phillips is the owner and Hubert Underwood is the manager. Most of the staff have been with Brad for over 20 years. Homewood Auto Body Specialists are located at 96 Robert Jemison Road in Homewood. A member of the Better Business Bureau, they service foreign and domestic cars and are ICAR and ASE certified. And yes, they'll provide free estimates. Their equipment is state-of-the-art to handle all of your collision-related work, and the staff trains constantly to stay up to date with all the latest techniques. All services are guaranteed as long as you own your car. They are a direct repair facility and do business with most all insurance companies. They are open Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. Call them today at 205-941-2410. 205-941-2410. That's Homewood Auto Body Specialists.
Savior, I come, I quiet my soul. Remember.
And welcome back into American Heritage Live, and we're going to pass the baton to State House Representative Matt Fridy, who's going to be breaking down for us the recent Obergefell versus Hodges Supreme Court decision regarding same-sex marriage. Matt, take it away.
Well, you had asked right before the break, what is the immediate impact? And the immediate impact is simply this. Any law that prohibits same-sex couples from marrying is now invalid. It's been held to be unconstitutional, as a violation of the 14th Amendment. The court relied, the majority opinion, of course it was a 5-4 decision, the majority opinion held that to constrict marriage to only opposite-sex couples violates the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment by violating a fundamental right. It also held, but in very strange language that was hard to follow, that it also violated the Equal Protection Clause. It didn't use any of any of the language it normally uses in examining equal protection. It just kind of said, well, you know, it's equal protection can help inform what a right is, and so we hold it violates equal protection. It was very kind of a hopefully a section of the opinion that the court will never follow again with regard to how to define the operation of the Equal Protection Clause. It was really, frankly, quite an awkward attempt to attach the alleged right to same-sex marriage to more than just one location in the Constitution, or more than one location in the 14th Amendment. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to interject this question, and you can merge this with your answer, but answer the question for us, Matt. Does the Supreme Court, in fact, have jurisdiction to rule on such a decision, in this issue, rather?
Yes, it does. And here's where I don't see... here's where I disagree with Chief Justice Moore and others who have argued that because the Constitution never uses the word marriage, that there's no jurisdiction for a federal court here. The reason there's jurisdiction here is because someone has alleged that their rights guaranteed under the Constitution, under the federal Constitution, are violated. That confers jurisdiction. They're pointing to something concrete that they say, you know, a right of theirs that is being violated by a law. And so, you know, and they allege that the right emanates from the words of the federal Constitution. That creates jurisdiction. With that said, I fully agree with Chief Justice Moore and others who say the Supreme Court simply got it wrong here. The Supreme Court has imposed its will. It found a right where none has ever existed before. And the problem here is what they really did, what the 5 members of the judiciary, of the Supreme Court did in this case, is they said, you know what, there's been enough public debate, there's been enough public discussion. We don't care that the public hasn't made up its mind one way or the other yet. Because there's been a lot of discussion, we're going to go in and make up the public's mind for it. And we're going to impose the existence of this right, never known before, through 50 centuries of recorded human history, through every civilization, throughout human history. It's never been known before. We're going to say that there's a fundamental right here. And it's you know, this was probably the first opinion during my lifetime. Of course, I was born after Roe versus Wade. But this is the first opinion in my lifetime, and certainly while practicing as a lawyer, that I have truly felt without any recourse. And what I mean by that is, what the court has done here is they have set themselves up as the ultimate arbiter, not of the federal Constitution, but of public policy. Issues that have always been left to the people to decide for themselves, democratically. This issue was just snatched away under the guise, under the thinnest veneer of constitutional authority.
Matt, so what do we do with this thing? Is there no turning back, or do we have some area? I know Jeff shared some at the beginning of the show about Congress passing legislation. I don't know what the percentage in favor of that would be. Where do we go with this thing? And as a Christian, how do we approach this?
Well, from a legal perspective, I think where we go is that, and I will tell you this, the day that it came out, and probably for a good 48-hour period, I was totally dejected. I'd given up hope. I'd decided we'd moved into a post-Christian era and that there was no turning back. But I'll tell you, the reason I have hope is that it was a 5-4 decision, and one change in Supreme Court personnel, and we can get a different decision. And I don't think that the four who are in the minority, Robert, Scalia, Thomas, and Alito, would shy away if we could replace Kennedy or one of the other liberals with a conservative from taking up the issue again and reversing it. And I'm not altogether convinced that that won't happen. You know, it's what gives us hope that Roe versus Wade will be overturned one day. You know, here's the problem. When the Supreme Court starts dabbling in social policy under the guise of the Constitution, the Supreme Court acted as though in Roe versus Wade that once they made that decision, that the issue would be settled. And we know that that's anything but true, right? The issue of abortion has continued to be on the forefront and of American thought, of American debate, of American politics. And why is that? It's because the Supreme Court stepped in and prematurely tried to resolve an issue that was still well underway in the public square as far as public dialogue goes. And they attempted to quell debate prematurely, and as a result, the issue has never been settled and probably won't be. And the same is true here. The Supreme Court has stepped in and said, this is what the law requires. They've tried to put an end to the public discourse. All they've done is heightened it. And so this issue is not going to go away. So long as there are Christians who believe in the biblical definition of marriage as one man, one woman, bound together, creating a home for the purpose of cleaving together, of procreation, of raising a family, then this issue is not going to go away. And I'm not convinced that it's even done yet. You know, there was an interesting AP poll that came out in the last couple of days. I saw it, and I can't remember the specific numbers, but since January, the number of people who support gay marriage has actually declined by, I think it was by 6 points. And the people who oppose it, the numbers have actually gone up. And so I think that it could be that this Supreme Court opinion, as it becomes implemented, people who at one point were ambivalent about it, or ambivalent about the issue, or were leaning towards being in favor of gay marriage, I think we could see a shift in public opinion back away from it.
Yeah, let me interject this too. Frank Pavone wrote for Brett Baird. He wrote this, that it's not about love. It's really about changing public policy. And when you look at the minority, the 4 of the 5 to 4, the dissenters, when you look at their decision for dissenting, you're looking at future, perhaps majority decisions, like you said. But let me mention 9 ways that redefining marriage can impact us, and I want you to comment on these at the end. Number 1, it harms children. It's been written on Focus on the Family that redefining marriage denies children of same-sex couples either a mother or father. Decades of social research science shows this. They're best raised in a married family with a mom and a dad. Government policy should reflect that. Number 2, forced closures of faith-based adoption agencies. Pressure is going to increase on religious beliefs being held in question there. Number 3, legal public challenges. Christian business owners who politely decline to use their talents to participate in same-sex ceremonies, there's going to be legal challenges and crippling fines. I've warned on this show against that. Number 4, parental rights. When you have young children being taught in school about homosexuality, the legalization of same-sex marriage is a trump card. This is going to override parental rights, and it's leaving them no say in the matter whatsoever. Number 5, tax-exempt statuses for churches and Christian organizations. 6, accrediting and licensing of private schools, professional licensing, employment criteria. 7, counseling. 8, grant exclusions that are designed, faith-based charities designed on God's design for sexuality, excluding organizations like that for grants. And number 9, the endangered freedoms. And let's shift gears into this because this was, Samuel Alito shared this concern, and I want you to comment on this. This was the majority of my concern. He wrote this, Justice Samuel Alito, in his dissent. He said, today's decision will be used to vilify Americans who are unwilling to assent to the new orthodoxy. In particular, he objects to the comparison between bans on same-sex marriage and the bans on interracial marriage that were widespread before the court overturned them in 1967, Loving v. Virginia. He said that the implications of this analogy will be exploited by those who are determined to stamp out every vestige of dissent. Matt, I want you to comment on that, concerned about basically the juggernaut trying to uproot and go after the Christian faith-based community?
There is no question that there has been a move afoot for a number of years to vilify, to insult, to make fun of, and to ridicule those of us who hold to traditional beliefs, and those of us who believe, for example, that marriage is one man, one woman. I don't have my level of concern is not as high as Justice Alito's, because I am not convinced that there's going to be a wholesale shift in opinion on this issue.
Oh, I don't either. No.
And the reason for that is I look at abortion as a good example. When Roe v. Wade came up, that wasn't even a 5-4 decision. I want to say that was 7-2 or 6-3. I can't remember.
Right.
The exact number.
Right. That's right.
But here you've got a 5-4, very closely divided court, and I just don't know that people are going to continue to change their minds on this issue one way or the other. And I don't see this issue going away. So, yes, this Obergefell decision could be used to vilify those of us who believe in traditional marriage and believe in the definition of marriage that was given to us by God and is obvious through nature and obvious through history. But I don't think we're going to be vilified any more than we are already being vilified. I don't think we're going to be attacked any more than we're already being attacked. And I think the more that they attack us, I can see a paradigm that in which support for that side begins to wither, begins to fall away. You know, one of the interesting things on that AP poll that I talked about a little while ago was that support for businesses not being forced to engage in to be involved in the gay marriage industry, or to support gay marriage through being involved in same-sex marriages. The support for those businesses was overwhelming in that poll.
Listen to this, Matt. The music's telling us it's time to take a break, and you can finish your train of thought on the other side. Listen to this quote by Hunter Baker, wrote in the Federalist June 29th, Matt and Ron. "No social change, no worldly court, no legislation will reorient me." Folks, you're listening to the voice of State Representative Matt Fridy. We'll be back on American Heritage Live.
In this redemption, love and mercy display, it lifted my eyes to see that your truth never fails.
Hi, this is Harry Reeder, Senior Pastor of Briarwood Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, and you're listening to American Heritage Live with Jeff DeShazo and Ron Meyer.
Jim King is a concerned American and one of our sponsors and friends here on American Heritage Live. Jim is on the board of the Hedges and Highways Prison Ministry. They provide adults and teens leaving prison with assistance in these areas: counseling, support groups, assistance in finding housing and employment, food and clothing and education. Right now, they're raising funds for gift bags, which includes items not provided in prisons. These items include toothpaste, washcloth, shaving cream, soap, and shampoo. It is amazing how many are in prison without any connection to family or friends. These gift bags will lift their spirits and allow them to feel support from a ministry that will help them once they get out. Hedges and Highways is a 501c3 organization, so all contributions are tax deductible. At the moment, their goal is to raise $20,000 for the gift bags, and they need your help. Please make checks payable to Hedges and Highways Prison Ministry, P.O. Box 112075, Birmingham, Alabama 35211, or call Director Lois Gardner for more information. That number is 205-516-5634, 205-516-5634. Please call them today. And welcome back into American Heritage Live. By the way, business folks in the community who are listening to us right now, if you're in business, small, large, private business, let me encourage you, if you'd like to sponsor a show like this, you want to become engaged, you want to become involved and participate with a show like this, we'd love to have you sponsor us. So give me a call today at 205-223-7653, 223-7653, and we'll talk about how you can sponsor such a show. Now, Matt, you were trying to continue a thought right before the break, so let's go back to that. Finish your thought, and then Ron has a question for you.
I'll tell you, my biggest concern, and Justice Roberts really sums it up in several parts of his dissent, where he talks about what are we supposed to do with this opinion now as justices? Does this mean that we just have a free-roving, freewheeling mandate from the Constitution to simply run around and constitutionalize every right we want, everything that we think ought to be a right, and make it so? And the problem here, and Justice Scalia touches on this very dramatically, the problem here is that it puts an end to democracy. And all of a sudden, we're not ruled by the people that we elect. We're ruled by 9 unelected justices, and we're subject to their whims and their beliefs. And they constrain themselves now only by the outer limits of their imagination. And that's, Chief Justice Roberts talks about that some. One of the things that Chief Justice Roberts points out in particular is, when we look specifically at this marriage right, if we use this equal dignity principle that the majority opinion uses over and over again, this is just about dignifying people, and it's just about dignifying relationships. Well, if we're not going to limit it to one man, one woman, why limit it to 2 people? And here's what Chief Justice Roberts wrote. He wrote, "One immediate question invited by the majority's position is whether states may retain the definition of marriage as a union of 2 people." And then Chief Justice Roberts cites a case currently pending in the 10th Circuit, came out of Utah, regarding plural marriage. He goes on, "Although the majority randomly inserts the adjective 2 in various places, it offers no reason at all why the 2-person element of the core definition of marriage may be preserved while the man-woman element may not. Indeed, from the standpoint of history and tradition, a leap from opposite-sex marriage to same-sex marriage is much greater than one from a 2-person union to plural unions, which have deep roots in some cultures around the world. If the majority is willing to take the big leap, it is hard to see how it can say no to the shorter one. It is striking how much of the majority's reasoning would apply with equal force to the claim of a fundamental right to plural marriage. If there is dignity in the bond between 2 men or 2 women who seek to marry and in their autonomy to make such profound choices, why would there be any less dignity in the bond between 3 people who, in exercising their autonomy, seek to make the profound choice to marry? If a same-sex couple has the constitutional right to marry because their children would otherwise, quote, suffer the stigma of knowing their families are somehow lesser, close quote, why wouldn't the same reasoning apply to a family of 3 or more persons raising children? If not having the opportunity to marry, quote, serves to disrespect and subordinate, close quote, gay and lesbian couples, why wouldn't the same imposition of this disability serve to disrespect and subordinate people who find fulfillment in polyamorous relationships? And then he cites to a Newsweek article estimating 500,000 polyamorous families in the United States.
Wow.
So I think immediately that's what's coming, is a push for polyamorous relationships and recognition of those as marriage, and the additional social upheaval that would come from that. Now, if the Supreme Court, if the majority on the Supreme Court that wrote this Obergefell opinion say no to plural marriage, the only reason they'll be doing it is because, well, it hasn't gained the level of popularity that same-sex relationships have gained, or same-sex marriage has gained. If they do that, then what they're saying is the Constitution is a majoritarian document. In other words, it doesn't protect the minority view. The minority view isn't protectable until it has reached what the Supreme Court perceives to be a majoritarian view, or enjoys the support of the majority of Americans. And so what's truly troubling, I think, in the final analysis of this opinion is that it's a wholesale adoption by the Supreme Court of what it perceives to be a pop culture viewpoint. And all of a sudden, those of us who are in a minority position, not necessarily, or not just with regard to same-sex marriage, but with regard to speaking our mind on conservative issues or saying things that aren't necessarily popular. If only the majority gets protected, then what happens to those of us in a minority position?
Wow.
Those of us who are counterculture now.
Matt, one other area too, and I've heard a lot of talk about this, is losing your tax-free status as a church if you will not marry same-sex couples. What do you think of that?
Well, there's obvious reason to be concerned there. Not immediately, but into the future, there could be a push for that. We saw the same thing with a Christian college that refused to allow individuals of different races.
Yeah,
to
Bob
date.
Jones University.
The Bob Jones University case,
Right.
and it lost its tax-exempt status. I think the argument could be made that you've got a real First Amendment problem, a significant free exercise problem, if we started singling out for discrimination those religious institutions that chose that based on their deeply held religious convictions were opposed to a form of marriage that other religious institutions may no longer oppose. So, I do think that the First Amendment is still there. I think the Free Exercise Clause is still there and still operates and forms a protection for churches in the face of attempts to take away their tax-exempt status based on the religious views. The problem there is that it forces to do that, to say that a church that won't marry gay couples but will marry others is in danger of losing its tax-exempt status. It forces the government to delve into the religious beliefs of the church. And of course, we as a people have always opposed the intertwinement of religion and government. We don't want government going in and deciding which churches are worthy and which churches are not. So,
Man, let me make this comment and jump in. Excuse me. Pardon me. Little summer pollen there. Frank Pavone wrote for Brett Baird on July 7th. I already made a comment earlier, but I thought this was excellent. He writes from Thomas Jefferson's writings, Volume 15, page 215. He wrote this comment, Thomas Jefferson for Berg. Each of the three departments, talking about the three branches of government, has equally the right to decide for itself what its duty is under the Constitution without any regard to what the others may have decided for themselves under a similar question. But basically, we need to allow democracy to work, and you're quite right. The government is basically doing a checkmate against democracy in the form of representative government that we have, and they've made some major mistakes with this. But number three, we as citizens, we've got to demand the right to be able to govern ourselves, that we need to challenge this, and which leads me to my question for Congress now. With a Republican-held Congress, my question is, what do you think is going to be the attempt or the next move by Republican-held Congress to try to check this decision?
I think that we'll see a push in the federal Congress and in state houses around the country to not roll back the decision, but instead to heighten and increase protections for religious individuals and for religious institutions. Of course, one of the things the Congress could always do is withhold funding to the court. I mean, it's got the power of the purse, and that's the check on that's one of the checks that it has on the Supreme Court and on the court system generally. I do not anticipate that Congress is going to take any kind of punitive action. It's interesting, the quote that you read from Jefferson, that is Thomas Jefferson disagreeing philosophically with Chief Justice Marshall.
Right.
In a case called Marbury versus Madison, where Chief Justice Marshall and the majority of the court announced the whole notion of judicial review, that it's emphatically the province of the court to say what the law is. Up until then, pretty much every branch it was well understood that every branch decided for itself what was constitutional and what was not. So, for example, Thomas Jefferson, when he vetoed congressional enactment.
So let's shift gears, Matt, and let me ask you this question, and that was excellent on the summary comments you made on Thomas Jefferson. All right, let me ask you this question, because let's go back to the states a minute. I think it needs to be said that the 39 plus states, 29 to 39 plus states that had same-sex rulings, before the Supreme Court made their decision, Matt, did so by judicial fiat. In other words, the vote was never brought before the state citizens. They never had an opportunity to vote. I want you to comment on that, because the impression is given, there's a nationwide movement, and the national opinion has suddenly turned in favor of same-sex marriage, and I highly disagree with that, that basically the states were hijacked by judicial decisions that the states never got an opportunity to vote on. So it gives a false impression. I want you to comment on that.
Well, you're absolutely right. There are four ways in which states adopted, quote-unquote, adopted homosexual marriage before this opinion in Oberg fell. The first was that there were a couple of states that, by popular vote of the people, they adopted gay marriage. I want to say there was one, maybe two states that did that. There were some other states, New York is one, and there's some others, where the state legislature adopted same-sex marriage. And then there was a third category where state Supreme Courts, and Iowa is an example of this, where a state Supreme Court said that gay marriage was required by the state constitution. That is a very small number of states. I mean, we're talking no more than, I want to say 8 or 10 in which that occurred. The vast majority of states that the media said had adopted gay marriage were states like in Alabama, where a federal judge imposed that on the people. It was not done democratically, as it was done in the few states where they had a direct vote of the people or their representatives voted in their legislature for it. The vast majority of states that were said to have adopted gay marriage didn't adopt it at all. It was imposed on them by the federal judiciary, reading the Windsor decision from a couple years ago where the U.S. Supreme Court struck down DOMA. So you're absolutely right. There was not some grand movement, popular movement in the majority of states to adopt same-sex marriage as their state's policy. There are actually relatively very few states where there was kind of a popular adoption of gay marriage.
I think California was one where the people rejected it and the courts overturned it. Am I right on that, Matt?
That's right. The people rejected it, and then their state Supreme Court overruled it and held that gay marriage was required by the state constitution.
Well, Matt, as you know, we have a Christian worldview here on the show at American Heritage Live, and I want our listeners to know, and I know you share that view. So,
that's right.
Serving in public office, this is your freshman year. We know we were all concerned about how the decision came down. So I'm going to ask you a direct question. What gives you hope as you face each day when you serve about such cultural shifts in this country? At the bottom line, no matter what men and women may do on the bench, what gives you hope?
I think the thing that gives me the most hope is the fact that God's still there. You know, He is still Lord. And He's going to be Lord regardless of Obergefell or any other opinion from the U.S. Supreme Court or a state Supreme Court or from any legislature. And I think at the end of the day, I know that my faith is secure, and I know that I know that I have a place, and so that gives me hope. Now, there are problems, there are bumps, and Christ never promised, God never promised that it was going to be easy, and we as Christians in the United States have had it easy. You know, we've never faced, by and large, what the first church experienced. And we may be headed towards a time like in Europe, which is really a post-Christian era that Europe has entered into.
Most definitely.
And we may be headed that way in the United States as well. On the other hand, we may experience a great revival. And we don't know. God knows, but we don't know. But what gives me hope is that God is still in control. Is it harder to raise our children now in the MTV era and the Google era? Yeah, it is. You've got issues like pornography that are just rampant, things that we didn't deal with as children. And so there has been a shift in society, and it is more difficult to raise our children now, and it is more difficult. Faith means more, I believe, now, and it costs more. We do have to put up with public ridicule, but we hold to what we know, and we know that God's in control, and we know that God's in charge, and we know that we serve Him, and we serve somebody who's so much bigger than gay marriage and so much bigger than, you know, all of the sin and everything else that surrounds us. And so that's what gives me hope.
Well, man, I tell you, it's always a pleasure having you here, and you are welcome to come back whenever you're available to give us commentary and comments on the Constitution. And your knowledge and expertise is always welcome. We bless you and appreciate your service to you, and we also honor your family for allowing you to serve in public office. And we promise you that Ron and I and our listeners will be praying for you as you serve, Matt.
I appreciate that.
Thanks,
I appreciate
man.
that. Me and the rest of the legislature, we can definitely use the prayers. And guys, I always enjoy being with you and appreciate the invitation and the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Thanks again, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
Folks, you've been listening to the voice of State District 73 Representative Matt Fridy here on American Heritage Live. Well, Ron, it's been another electric show, and we want to invite our listeners. You've been listening to, and maybe you've been on the fence about the hope that we've been talking about concerning our attention and our allegiance and who we defer to, and that's the person of Jesus Christ. And it's not. Let me just state something for the record. It's not a religion. This is not just one more religion. Here's what makes Christianity different, or serving the Lord different. He died for us before we loved him. He died for us on the cross for sin, a one-time sacrifice for sin. Before we were looking for him, he died for us. Now, let me ask you something. What founder of faith or belief system has ever done that? That ever dealt with sin on a cross, died on the cross for himself, to not only deal with sin, but do away with it if we believed on him. The word says if we believe on him in our hearts that he died on the cross, confess with our mouth that he was raised from the dead, we shall be saved. We are not, like Paul said, men who have no hope. Our hope is in the resurrection, but Jesus died for you. And the good news is, we talked about pornography and other addictions and the problem of sin that other religions just cannot deal with through self-mutilation or self-flagellation. The hope is in what Jesus did on the cross, and we choose to believe in him. Let me encourage you today to pray with me. Lord Jesus, I give you my life today. That's it. I'm done. Through being Lord of my own life, I accept you as the Lord and Redeemer of my life. Take away my sin. Forgive me. Give me a new heart. Fill me with your power and your spirit, and I will live for you the rest of my life, and I will learn to know you and share others about you. In Jesus' name. Let me encourage you to go to a local church. Get plugged in where they preach Jesus Christ crucified and was raised from the dead, and teach the Word of God, who Jesus is. Get in small groups in that church where you can learn and grow. Christianity is about relationships with other people, where you can be discipled and learn more about his character and to get his character on the inside of you. Well, we always want to thank our sponsors who make this show possible, and they are Brad Phillips with Homewood Auto Body Specialist, Jim King of Hedges and Highways Ministry, and myself, I'm a sponsor too, with Jeff DeShazo, Keller Williams Realty in Hoover. I invite you to call me today if you'd like to sponsor the show at 205-223-7653. Would love to talk to you. And don't forget our Facebook archives. Go to facebook.com/American Heritage Live. Just hit the YouTube channel. You can catch up on past shows, some great ones, like with shows with Supreme Court Justice for the state of Alabama, Chief Justice Roy Moore, activist and film producer Dinesh D'Souza, and others. David Barton of Wall Builders, tremendous interviews from the past. We'd love to have you engage and look at those. Well, we've got a minute left. Ron, any final comments?
Well, let's get Richie in here. Jeff, he's been warming up all show long to do this little whistle for you. Here it comes. Go ahead, Richie. You the best you can. Thank you, Richie. Dan, you want to show him out of the house? Thank you. Good job, man.
That's great work. Great work. Old time radio. Well, folks, don't forget, we'll be back next week at the same news slide on 3 o'clock here on 97.7 The Peach every Sunday afternoon. So long, everybody.